John Carter stood at the large window of the observation deck. His hands trembled as he watched the dark ships fill the sky above the Nixian city. There were hundreds of them, maybe thousands. The Vraxian warships blocked out the light from the twin suns, casting long shadows across the beautiful crystal towers of the Nixian capital. John had served as Earth's diplomat to the Nixians for 3 years. They were a peaceful race. They had no weapons, no armies. Their society focused on art, music, and the pursuit of knowledge. The tallest buildings in their cities were not government offices but museums and concert halls. Their launching drop. "Ships," said Mira, John's Nixian assistant. Her voice was calm, but her eyes showed fear. The skin around her neck flaps had turned pale blue, a sign of extreme distress in her species. "We need to get to the embassy," John said. He grabbed his communication device and tried to contact Earth's military command. The signal was blocked. The first explosions shook the building. In the distance, the crystal towers began to fall. John had seen war before, but this was different. This wasn't war. The Nixians weren't fighting back. They couldn't. This was something else. "It's happening across the whole planet," Mira said, looking at her own device. Every city, every settlement, a Vraxian message broadcast across all communication channels. Their harsh, clicking language translated automatically through John's earpiece. "The purification of this sector has begun. The weak shall make way for the strong. Glory to the Vraxian Empire." John felt sick. This wasn't an invasion or a war. It was extermination. "We have to document this," he told Mira. "Earth needs to know. Everyone needs to know." They ran through the crowded streets. Nixians moved in confused groups, their 7-foot frames bumping into each other as they tried to understand what was happening. They had no concept of mass violence. Their language didn't even have a word for genocide. A Vraxian dropship landed in the plaza ahead. The doors opened and soldiers poured out. 8-foot-tall, armored figures with weapons John had never seen before. They fired into the crowd without warning or words. John pulled Mira into a side street. "We can't help them by dying," he whispered as she tried to go back for her people. They reached the Earth Embassy but found it surrounded by Vraxian troops. The building was already on fire. "There's another way," Mira said. She led John through a series of underground tunnels that connected the major buildings in the city. They emerged near the spaceport. Most of the ships were destroyed, but a few small vessels remained. As they approached, a voice called out to them, "Human, stop." John turned to see a Vraxian stepping from the shadows. He pushed Mira behind him, but the Vraxian raised his hands in what seemed like a peaceful gesture. "I am Kel, science officer on the destroyer Vengeance," the Vraxian said. "I do not agree with this slaughter." John didn't lower his guard. "Why should I believe you?" "Because I can get you off this planet," Kel replied. "Someone must tell what happened here. Someone must witness." A series of explosions lit up the sky behind them. The royal palace, the greatest achievement of Nixian architecture, collapsed in a cloud of crystal dust. "There's an emergency pod," Kel said. "It's small, but it will reach your nearest outpost." Mira touched John's arm. "Go," she said. "I will. Stay with my people." "They'll kill you," John said. "They'll kill us all anyway," she replied. "But if you escape, if you tell what happened here, maybe we will not be forgotten." Another explosion rocked the ground. They had minutes, maybe seconds. "The pod is this way," Kel insisted. John looked at Mira, memorizing her face, the delicate pattern of scales around her eyes, the slight purple tint to her skin that all Nixians shared. "I'll make sure the universe knows," he promised. Mira pressed something into his hand, a small crystal sculpture, the kind Nixians created to mark important moments in their lives. This one showed 2 figures, a human and a Nixian, standing side by side. "So you remember us as we were," she said. Then she turned and ran back toward the city, toward her people. Kel led John to a small launch bay where a single-person escape pod waited. "It's programmed to reach your outpost at Alpha Centauri," the Vraxian explained. The journey will take 6 days. Why are you doing this? John asked. Kel's faceplates shifted in what might have been shame. What my people are doing here has no honor. It is not war, it is... He struggled to find the word. It is evil. As John climbed into the pod, Kel handed him a data chip. I copied our attack plans, all of them. Your people should know that we won't stop with the Nixians. The pod's door sealed. Through the small window, John watched Kel step back. Seconds later, the launch sequence completed, and the pod shot up through the atmosphere. As the planet fell away below him, John activated the pod's external cameras. The sight would haunt him forever. The entire planet was burning. From space, the fires formed patterns as they spread across continents and island chains. It looked almost beautiful, like an art piece the Nixians might have created. But this was no art. This was the end of a civilization. John clutched the crystal sculpture Mira had given him and made a silent promise. Earth would respond to this. But how? What could possibly answer such complete destruction? 6 days later, the pod reached the human outpost at Alpha Centauri. John was taken directly to the commander's office, still clutching Mira's sculpture. You need to see this, he said, handing over Kel's data chip. The commander, a woman named Olivia Wright, reviewed the data while John told his story. When he finished, she was silent for a long time. How will we respond? John finally asked. A military strike? Dr. Wright shook her head slowly. The Vraxians expect that. They understand war. They're prepared for it. She looked at the crystal sculpture in John's hand. But there are weapons more terrible than bombs or guns. Weapons that attack not bodies but minds. What do you mean? John asked. The Vraxians think they've erased the Nixians from existence, Dr. Wright said. But as long as you remember, as long as that data exists, they haven't succeeded. Memory, Mr. Carter. Truth, these can be more devastating than any fleet of warships. She stood up and looked out at the stars. The Vraxians just taught us how they make war. Now we'll teach them how Earth makes justice. John looked down at the small crystal sculpture. 2 figures standing together, the last artwork of a dead civilization. What's the plan? He asked. First, you'll testify before the United Nations Space Command, Dr. Wright said. Every detail, every moment. The universe will know what happened to the Nixians, and then, Dr. Wright's eyes hardened, and then we'll show the Vraxians something they've never seen before. Not revenge, not war, something far more terrifying. What could be more terrifying than war? John asked. Conscience, Mr. Carter, she replied. We're going to give the Vraxians a conscience. 6 months passed since John Carter returned to Earth with news of the Nixian genocide. The world's governments argued about how to respond. Military leaders wanted to send warships. They talked of revenge and justice through force. But Dr. Olivia Wright's plan won in the end. Sam Mitchell watched Earth grow smaller through the window of the ship called Memory. He was not a soldier. Before this mission, he worked as a war reporter, telling stories from the worst places on Earth and beyond. Now he led a team of 20 people, historians, artists, and scientists, on a mission unlike any in human history. Final check complete. We're ready to leave Earth orbit, said Nancy Bell, the ship's pilot. She was a former commercial pilot who volunteered for this mission when she heard about the Nixians. Take us out, Sam said. Next stop, the edge of Vraxian space. The Memory was one of 50 civilian ships leaving Earth that day. They carried no weapons. Instead, they carried cameras, recording equipment, and powerful broadcasting technology. Their mission was not to fight, but to remember. Sam gathered his team in the main room of the ship. Everyone knows their jobs, he said. We're not here to start a war. We're here to make sure no one forgets what happened to the Nixians. Greg Wilson, the team's chief historian, raised his hand. The Vraxians will try to stop us. They'll jam our signals, maybe even attack our ships. That's why we have 50 ships spread across their border, Sam explained. If they stop one, the others keep broadcasting. If they stop 10, the rest continue. They can't stop us all. Back on Earth, Dr. Wright worked in a large underground facility. With her was Alan Reed, a young man who had designed a special kind of artificial intelligence. This AI had one purpose: to make sure every Vraxian citizen saw the truth about what their government had done. The Vraxian network has strong security, Alan said as they tested the system. But they've never faced anything like this before. Dr. Wright watched the screens showing the progress of the 50 ships. The Vraxians think they erased the Nixians from history, she said. They're about to learn that humans don't let anyone be forgotten. 3 weeks later, the memory reached its position near a major Vraxian colony world. Sam's team set up their equipment and began their work. First, they broadcast simple images, pictures of Nixian cities before the attack, recordings of their music, samples of their art. They sent these directly into the Vraxian information networks. At first, the Vraxian government blocked the signals, but Alan's AI found new paths, new ways to get the information through. When one channel closed, 3 more opened. The Vraxians had never dealt with this kind of attack before. They're sending ships to investigate, Nancy reported one morning. 3 warships heading this way. Sam nodded. They had expected this. Keep broadcasting. If they try to board us, we use Plan B. The Vraxian ships surrounded the memory but did not attack. Instead, they sent a message. Human vessel, you are violating Vraxian space. Leave immediately or be destroyed. Sam sent a reply. We are not in Vraxian space. We are in neutral territory. We are not armed. We are simply sharing information. The standoff lasted 3 days. Then something unexpected happened. The smallest Vraxian ship moved closer and sent a private message. We have seen your broadcasts. Some of us want to know more. Some of us have questions. This was exactly what Dr. Wright had hoped for. Sam invited a small group from the Vraxian ship to visit the memory. 5 Vraxian officers came aboard, their tall frames making the human ship seem small. Why do you show us these things? Asked the Vraxian leader, an officer named Drav. Is this how you prepare for war? Sam shook his head. This is not about war, this is about truth. Your government destroyed an entire species. We want to make sure they are remembered. He showed the Vraxians John Carter's full testimony. He showed them recordings of Nixian music, samples of their art, and records of their scientific achievements. The Vraxians watched in silence. Our leaders told us the Nixians were a threat, said one of the younger officers. They said they had secret weapons. They had no weapons at all, Sam replied. They had never fought a war in their entire history. Before the Vraxians left, Sam gave each of them a copy of all the records. Share this if you want, or don't. The choice is yours. 3 days later, the Vraxian ships withdrew. Thrispri continued its broadcasts. On another ship, the Witness, Kate Ford led a different kind of mission. Her team worked to save everything they could find about Nixian language and culture. They recorded stories from humans who had visited the Nixian world. They collected artifacts that had been off-planet when the genocide happened. We need to preserve everything, Kate told her team. Every word, every song, every story. Nothing gets lost. Across Vraxian space, Earth's 50 ships created a network of truth. They did not invade. They did not attack. They simply remembered, and they made it impossible for the Vraxians to forget. 6 months into the mission, the first cracks appeared in Vraxian society. A group of scientists published a paper questioning the government's account of the Nixian threat. A famous Vraxian artist created a memorial piece based on Nixian crystal sculptures. Small groups began to meet in secret to discuss what really happened. The Vraxian government responded with force. They arrested the scientists. They destroyed the memorial art. They tried to find and stop the secret meetings. But with each act of suppression, more Vraxians became curious. More began to ask questions. 1 year into the mission, Sam received a message from Earth. It was from Dr. Wright. Phase 2 begins now. We're releasing the AI into their networks. That night, every screen in Vraxian space showed the same image. a single Nixian child looking up at the sky as the warships arrived. Below the image were words in the Vraxian language. Remember what was lost. The Vraxian government couldn't stop it. When they shut down one network, the AI moved to another. When they changed their security, the AI adapted. The truth spread, like a wave that couldn't be stopped. On the memory, Sam received a new message. This one came from inside Vraxian space, from an ordinary citizen. We didn't know. Some of us want to know everything. Some of us want to make this right. Tell us what to do. Sam shared the message with his team. Greg Wilson, the historian, smiled for the first time in months. It's working, he said. This is how Earth fights back. Not with bombs, but with memory. Sam looked at the stars outside the ship's window. Somewhere out there, the Vraxians were beginning to understand what they had done, and that understanding would change them more deeply than any war could have. This is just the beginning, he said quietly. The real response has barely started. 3 years passed since Earth began its response to the Nixian genocide. The Vraxian government, which had expected a military attack, did not know how to fight against the spread of information. Their society, built on strength and conquest, now faced an enemy they could not defeat with weapons. Kate Sullivan sat in a small room on the outer edge of a Vraxian colony world. She was a language expert who had spent the last 2 years studying Nixian poetry and stories. Now she worked to translate them into forms that Vraxians could understand. Their emotional framework is different from ours, she explained to her small team. Vraxians value strength and victory. Nixians valued beauty and connection. We need to bridge that gap. Kate had come to this Vraxian colony in secret. She lived among the local people, pretending to be a trader. Her real work happened at night, when she met with a growing group of Vraxians who wanted to learn the truth about the Nixians. This poem was written by a Nixian child, Kate told the group gathered in her room. She read the translation she had created, carefully adapted to use Vraxian concepts of honor and legacy. When she finished, the room was silent. Then one of the Vraxians, an older female named Trell, spoke. I have served in our fleet for 40 years. I believed we were bringing order to the galaxy, but this child had wisdom we lack. Across the Vraxian Empire, similar scenes played out. Earth's teams worked from hiding places, sharing Nixian culture with anyone who would listen. At first, only a few Vraxians were curious, but as time passed, more and more of them began to question what their government had done. On the Vraxian homeworld, military leaders tried to stop the spread of information. They blocked communication channels. They arrested anyone who spoke about the Nixians. They created new stories claiming the Nixians had been dangerous enemies who needed to be destroyed. But Earth's approach was flexible. When one channel was blocked, 3 new ones appeared. When memorials to the Nixians were destroyed, they reappeared the next day in greater numbers. Small crystal sculptures, copies of Nixian art, began to appear in public places. No one knew who put them there. Alan Reed, working from Earth, continued to improve his AI system. The program learned and adapted, finding new ways to share information across the Vraxian Empire. It became impossible for any Vraxian to avoid learning about the species their government had destroyed. They're trying to create a special force to find and stop our people, Alan told Dr. Wright during a meeting. They call it the Truth Suppression Unit. Dr. Wright nodded. She had expected this. And how is our education program going? This was the most powerful part of Earth's response. Paul Hayes, a former university professor, had established a network of secret schools across Vraxian space. In these schools, young Vraxians learned the true history of the genocide. We have over 200 schools now, Alan reported. Each one teaches about 30 students. The first graduates have started creating their own schools. One such school operated in the basement of a building in the Vraxian capital city. Paul taught a group of 20 young Vraxians, most of them children of government officials. These students had the most to lose if discovered, but they were also in the best position to create change. Today we will hear from someone who witnessed the destruction of the Nixian homeworld, Paul told his students. John Carter appeared on a screen. He was older now, his face lined with the memory of what he had seen. He told his story simply, without anger or blame. He showed the crystal sculpture that Mira had given him before she died. When the recording ended, one of the students, a young Vraxian named Vex, stood up. "My father commands a battle fleet. He tells me that strength is everything, that the weak deserve to be conquered. But I see no strength in destroying a people who could not fight back." Paul nodded. This was happening across Vraxian space, young people questioning the values of their society. It was a slow change, but unstoppable. Like water wearing away stone, the truth gradually reshaped Vraxian thinking. The Vraxian government grew desperate. They tried new tactics to regain control, public executions of truth terrorists, rewards for reporting neighbors who spoke about the Nixians, a new education program that taught children that the genocide had been necessary and right. None of it worked. The change had already begun, deep in the heart of Vraxian society. 7 years after the genocide, the first public protests started. In the second largest Vraxian city, a group of 500 citizens gathered in the main square. They carried no weapons. They simply stood in silence, each holding a small crystal sculpture in the Nixian style. Government forces arrived to break up the protest. But when ordered to arrest the protesters, many of the soldiers refused. Some even joined the silent group. The news spread across Vraxian space. The next day, similar protests happened in 5 more cities. The day after, 20 cities saw protests. The government could not stop it. Daniel Foster, who had been working secretly for years, now stepped forward as Earth's official ambassador to the Vraxian colonies. He met with military leaders who had broken away from the main government. "Humanity does not want to destroy your civilization," he told them. "We want you to transform it, to become better than you were." One of the Vraxian commanders, a battle-scarred veteran named Czar, replied, "For generations we have valued strength above all else. We thought the Nixians were weak because they did not fight. Now I wonder if they were stronger than us in ways we could not see." On Earth, the United Nations Space Command met to discuss next steps. Some leaders argued that now was the time to launch a military strike, while the Vraxian Empire was divided. But most supported Dr. Wright's approach. "We didn't respond to genocide with more killing," she said in her address to the assembly. "We responded with memory, with truth, and that has proven more powerful than any weapon we could have used." The Vraxian government made one final, desperate move. They announced a mass memory modification program, a technology that would erase all knowledge of the Nixian genocide from their population. But they were too late. The scientist in charge of the program was Kel, the same Vraxian who had helped John Carter escape years before. Instead of creating a tool to erase memories, he built one that would preserve them forever. The change in Vraxian society had begun. It could not be stopped, and it would lead to a reckoning unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. 8 years had passed since the destruction of the Nixian civilization. The Vraxian Empire was no longer united. Their society was divided between those who supported the old government and those who demanded change. Civil protests grew larger, every day, spreading across all Vraxian worlds. Daniel Foster walked through the streets of the largest Vraxian colony city. Once he had worked in secret, but now he served openly as Earth's ambassador. Vraxian citizens nodded to him as he passed. Some even stopped to thank him. "The truth school saved my child," one Vraxian mother told him. "My daughter now teaches others about the Nixians. She wants to help build a memorial." Daniel smiled. The schools that Paul Hayes had started now operated in the open on many Vraxian worlds. Young Vraxians learned not just about the genocide, but about Nixian culture, art, and philosophy. They learned a different way of seeing the universe. "The change is happening faster than we expected," Daniel reported during his weekly call to Earth. Dr. Wright listened from her office at the United Nations Space Command headquarters. "What about the military? Are they still loyal to the government?" she asked. Daniel's expression grew serious. "The military is splitting. Many officers have joined the reform movement. They refuse to fire on protesters. Some units have declared support for a new government. This was the most dangerous time. Civil war seemed possible. If the Vraxian military fought itself, billions could die. We need to prevent more bloodshed, Dr. Wright said. The Vraxians must find a peaceful path forward. On the Vraxian homeworld, the government leaders met in an emergency session. Their empire was falling apart. The truth about the Nixian genocide had spread to every corner of their territory. We must crush these rebels with full force, said General Vor, one of the oldest military leaders. Show them the strength of the true Vraxian spirit. But many, at the table, no longer believed in solving problems through violence. Admiral Larn, who commanded the largest fleet, stood up. I have seen the records. I have learned what we did to the Nixians, he said. There was no honor in that action. If we respond with more killing now, we prove the humans right about us. The meeting ended without agreement. That night, soldiers loyal to General Vor tried to arrest Admiral Larn and other military leaders who supported change. But they found the Admiral's quarters empty. Larn and 50 other high-ranking officers had left the capital. 3 days later, Admiral Larn appeared on every communication channel across Vraxian space. Behind him stood other military leaders, government officials, and ordinary citizens. We announced the formation of a transitional council, Larn said. We seek peaceful change for our society. We must face what we have done and find a better path forward. The Vraxian civil conflict had begun, but it was unlike any civil war in human history. The reform movement, led by Admiral Larn, refused to use violence. When government forces attacked, the reformers withdrew rather than fight back. Sam Mitchell, still operating the ship memory in Vraxian space, documented everything. His broadcasts now reached all Vraxian worlds without interference. Many government soldiers watched these broadcasts and then laid down their weapons. This is not a revolution won by force, Sam told his crew. This is change through understanding, through conscience. Kate Sullivan continued her work with Vraxian language and culture. She helped create a new education program that combined Vraxian and Nixian ideas. Young Vraxians learned to value not just strength but also beauty, connection, and peace. The Nixians believed that understanding others was the highest form of wisdom, Kate explained to a group of Vraxian teachers. By learning about them, you honor their memory. 9 years after the genocide, the reform movement controlled most Vraxian territory. The old government held only the capital city and a few military bases. General Vor and his supporters prepared for a final battle. We will die as true Vraxians, he told his remaining troops, not as weak creatures corrupted by human ideas. The night before the planned attack, something unexpected happened. Kell, the scientist who had helped John Carter escape the Nixian world years before, entered General Vor's command center. He carried a small device. What is the meaning of this interruption? Vor demanded. Kell placed the device on the table. I want you to see something before you send more of our people to die. The device projected an image into the air. It showed the Nixian homeworld as it had been before the genocide. Beautiful crystal cities, peaceful people, art and music everywhere. This is what we destroyed, Kell said. This is what can never be recovered. Then the image changed to show Vraxian children in the new schools, learning about Nixian culture. It showed Vraxian artists creating works inspired by Nixian designs. It showed former soldiers helping to build memorials. And this is what humans have helped us build instead of destroying us in return, Kell said. They had the power to wipe us out as we did the Nixians. Instead, they gave us a chance to become better. General Vor stared at the images for a long time. The room was silent. Then, to everyone's surprise, he sat down heavily in his chair. I am too old to change, he said quietly. But perhaps our people are not. The next morning, instead of launching an attack, General Vor sent a message to Admiral Larn. He offered to surrender control of the capital without bloodshed. On Earth, the United Nations Space Command received the news with relief. Dr. Wright smiled as she read the report. It worked, she told her team. Humanity's response worked. John Carter, who had witnessed the beginning of the genocide, was now an advisor to the UN's Xenological Studies Division. When he heard about Vor's surrender, he took out the small crystal sculpture that Mira had given him years ago. The two figures, human and Nixian, standing together. "We remembered," he said to the sculpture. And that remembrance changed everything. The Vraxian civil conflict ended not with a battle but with an agreement. The Transitional Council would lead the Vraxian people toward a new form of government. Representatives from Earth would help, not as conquerors, but as advisors. Daniel Foster, meeting with Admiral Larn after the agreement was signed, asked a question that had been on his mind for years. Why did it work? Why did our approach succeed when the Vraxians could have simply fought back? Larn thought for a moment before answering. Because you found a weapon we had no defense against. Not bombs or guns, but truth. You made us see ourselves as we truly were, and once seen, that truth could not be unseen. The transformation of Vraxian society had begun, but the full reckoning for the Nixian genocide still lay ahead. 10 years had passed since the Nixian genocide. The Vraxian government had fallen. A new council led their society, working to build something better from the ruins of their old empire. Humans and Vraxians now worked together across the galaxy. The empty world that had once been the Nixian homeworld orbited its twin suns in silence. No one had settled there after the genocide. By agreement between Earth and the new Vraxian Council, the planet was declared a memorial site, protected by ships from many worlds. Lisa Morgan stood at the window of the newly completed Museum of Remembrance. The building rose from the ruins of what had once been the Nixian capital city. It was built in the Nixian style, with tall crystal towers that caught the light of the twin suns. Lisa had been one of the first documentarians to join Earth's response team years ago. Now she served as the director of the museum, working to preserve everything that remained of Nixian civilization. "The last display is ready," said her assistant, a young Vraxian named Trell. "Would you like to see it?" Lisa nodded and followed Trell through the museum halls. Each room held something saved from the destruction: Nixian art, music recordings, scientific discoveries, stories, and poems. There were also personal items donated by humans who had visited the Nixian world before it was destroyed, gifts from Nixian friends, photos, letters. The final room was the largest. At its center stood a perfect recreation of a Nixian gathering place with crystal benches arranged in a circle. Above it floated thousands of small lights, one for each Nixian city that had been destroyed. "It's perfect," Lisa said softly. Outside, the museum ships arrived from across the galaxy. Tomorrow would be the official opening ceremony. Representatives from 50 species would attend, including the new Vraxian leadership. On Earth, Dr. Olivia Wright prepared for her journey to the ceremony. In her office at the United Nations Space Command, she met with John Carter one last time before they departed. "Did you ever imagine it would end like this?" she asked him. "When you first returned with news of the genocide?" John looked down at the small crystal sculpture he still carried everywhere. "No," he admitted. "I wanted revenge then. I wanted the Vraxians to suffer as the Nixians had suffered. And now?" He was quiet for a moment. "Now I understand why your plan was better. War would have just created more hatred, more death. This way something good has come from terrible loss." The next day, thousands gathered for the opening of the Museum of Remembrance. The ceremony took place in the large plaza outside the main entrance. Humans stood side by side with Vraxians and representatives from many other worlds. Lisa Morgan spoke first, explaining the purpose of the museum: to ensure that the Nixian civilization would never be forgotten, that their art and wisdom would continue to influence the galaxy. Then Admiral Larn, now the leader of the Vraxian Transitional Council, stepped forward. The crowd grew quiet. This was the moment many had been waiting for. 10 years ago, my people committed an unforgivable crime," Larn began. His voice was strong and clear. "We destroyed an entire civilization. We tried to erase them from history. We believed this showed our strength. He paused, looking out at the gathered crowd. We were wrong. True strength is not found in destruction. The humans showed us this. When they discovered what we had done, they could have destroyed us in return. They had the power. Many would say they had the right. Larn knelt down, a gesture that no Vraxian military leader had ever made in public before. Instead, they responded with something more powerful than weapons. They responded with memory, with truth. They forced us to see what we had done, to face it, to remember it. And in doing so, they gave us the chance to become better than we were. He stood again and gestured to a group of young Vraxians who stepped forward. Each carried a crystal sculpture in the Nixian style. These were created by our children, who now study Nixian art and philosophy in our schools. They will grow up understanding what was lost. They will help build a society that values creation over destruction. After the ceremony, John Carter walked alone through the museum. In each room, he found memories of the world he had known briefly before its destruction. He recognized places, artworks, even faces in the images and recordings. In the final room, he sat on one of the crystal benches. An old Vraxian man entered and sat nearby. It took John a moment to recognize him. "Kel," he said. The Vraxian nodded. "I wasn't sure you would remember me." "You saved my life," John replied. "Because of you, I was able to tell what happened here." They sat in silence for a while, looking up at the lights that represented the lost Nixian cities. "Was it worth it?" Kel finally asked. "The path your people chose." John thought about the question. It took 10 years instead of 10 days. If we had responded with war, it might have been faster. But what would have been left afterward? More destruction, more hatred. And now there's something new growing, something better. As they spoke, a young Vraxian child approached John. The child held out a small crystal sculpture, a perfect recreation of a Nixian art piece. "My grandfather was a pilot in the fleet that came here," the child said. "He told me to give you this. He said you helped our people find a better way." John accepted the gift with surprise. "Thank you," he said. "What's your name?" "Mira," the child replied. "I was named after a Nixian teacher in our history books." John felt tears in his eyes. He looked down at the sculpture in his hands, then at the one he had carried for 10 years. They were different, but they held the same spirit, the Nixian love of beauty and connection. Later that day, Dr. Wright found John standing outside the museum, looking up at the twin suns setting over the horizon. "Earth's response worked better than we could have hoped," she said. "The Galactic Council has adopted the Genocide Convention. No species will ever again do what the Vraxians did to the Nixians." John nodded. Not because they fear punishment, but because they understand why. It's wrong. As darkness fell, lights began to glow across the ruins of the Nixian capital. Not rebuilding what was lost, but marking it, remembering it. The Museum of Remembrance glowed brightest of all, a beacon visible from orbit. Humanity's greatest weapon was never our technology or our military strength, John said quietly. It was our ability to remember, to bear witness, and to insist that evil be confronted with truth. The twin suns set completely, but the lights of remembrance continued to shine in the darkness. And they would continue to shine for generations to come, ensuring that what was lost would never be forgotten and what was learned would never be lost again.